Hey, I am back for another VW Scirocco restoration video. If you found my channel for the first time, welcome. I appreciate you stopping by and taking a look. If you've been following my progress, welcome back. I appreciate everybody who's reached out via a comment or by email, and especially those of you who have sent pictures of your projects. I really do appreciate seeing the work that you're doing on your Sciroccos. Keep them coming. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm just a guy with a garage and some tools trying to bring this 1985 VW Mark II Scirocco back to life after it sat idle for 15 years. In this video, I'm going to replace the stock VW oil cooler. This should be a fairly simple job with the engine torn apart as it is. If you've got your stock engine put together, maybe a little bit more difficult, but still a pretty straightforward procedure. I'll also talk a little bit about the stock oil cooler. After doing a bit of research online and searching the VW boards, there seems to be a little bit of conflict or controversy about what that oil cooler's purpose is, if you need it, how to install it, etc. And finally, over the jackhammering noise of my neighbor across the street, I'd really appreciate it if you would consider hitting the like button or leaving a comment to let the folks at YouTube know that somebody out there is watching these videos. As a token of my appreciation, here's a video of some guy riding a little horse through town. All right, without any more ado, here's the video. Let's see, once the oil filter is off, what you've got left is the oil cooler. And this thing looks like it's seen better days. It's held on by 127 millimeter nuts. Here's what it looks like from the top. And here's an exploded view from the Bentley manual showing how the oil cooler attaches to the oil filter flange via one nut on the bottom. That's basically where the coolant's going to come in, both these sides, swirl around, take the heat from the engine oil. So I am going to replace this guy just because I have access to it. Taking the hoses off. This is where the funky looking number 4 hose goes to. All right, so this is kind of the setup of these hoses that go into the oil cooler. You've got the water pump, the top outlet comes up into the flange that's on the front of the cylinder head, comes into the side. Then this downspout off of the front flange comes through this funky looking hose into the top of the oil cooler, swirls around, and then out from the bottom goes into this tee-off, which goes into the bottom of the water pump, and then I believe this hooks into the hard line, which goes into the heater core.
Exactly.
Now, let's see. Through my research online and mainly through some of the VW board, there's lots of different opinions as to whether this is actually an oil cooler or an oil warmer.
What?
I believe there's actually more of an opinion that this acts like more of an oil warmer during cold temperature starts. So that's the purpose of it. In terms of which cars had oil coolers, that's all over the map. Apparently all the 16 valve cars, from what I can read, have an oil cooler. And then it gets a little interesting. Some folks are saying that only the VWs that were shipped to the United States in cold climates actually were shipped with one of these oil coolers or / oil warmers, whereas there's some evidence both ways to say that cars that were shipped to California did not have the oil cooler, although some folks claim they've got cars that were shipped to California and they indeed do. Now, one thing that was interesting, this is a different video, but this is the front coolant flange off of the cylinder head, and it is pretty darn corroded. And while I went out looking for one of these as a replacement to find new, the ones that I found didn't have this downspout. Okay, so that totally, I didn't understand that at the time, but it totally makes sense now that for those cars that were delivered without an oil cooler, you wouldn't need this. Right, definitely wouldn't need this. This hose wouldn't be here as a bypass. You would just have a straight pass through over to the heater core. So it's been an interesting sort of thing. Other folks are saying that all VW Mark IIs with JH 1.8 liter JH engines came with one, but again, the evidence is kind of all over. So I guess, you know, I would be super interested for all the folks that are watching these videos from elsewhere, especially the folks over in Europe or South America, etc. I'd like to know for the Scirocco or even sort of the 85, 86 cars that you've got, does yours have an oil cooler? Number one, just interested if it did or if it did not. And then, have you had any issues with it? Is it leaking?
Leaks won't hold me back.
Has it corroded out? Some of these hoses are difficult to find. And then, you know, this thing is a whole nother story, which I'll get to in a different video. Yeah, that's a different story. All I know is that I've got one. There it is. There's the new one. This is how the hoses work. And let's go ahead and put it on. So once you've got that off, it should be as easy as taking that 27mm nut off. This thing should drop straight down, and then I've got a new one to replace it. Alright, one oil cooler. It doesn't actually look in too bad of a condition.
Are you serious?
Looks like it's got some of the seal still left on the top. The O-ring must be still stuck on there because it's not on here. But there's definitely some corrosion on the outside. Like I said, I've got a new one. So there's the old one.
Damn.
Yeah, so I can see that the O-ring is still on this one. I'll see if I can peel it off. I assume, just like everything else, it's going to be hard as a rock. So I will be careful and try to peel that off.
That's what she said.
Alright, so that O-ring didn't come out too difficult. The surface looks pretty nice. So I just need to clean up these lines a little bit. Doesn't look too bad underneath there. But I think this is looking okay. And again, I do have a new one. I do have an O-ring, and I bought the special seal. It said in the manual to use a sealer.
Alright, so here's another place where the manual calls for a sealing paste, VW sealing paste, and if you go out and look for the stuff, it is insanely expensive, combined with the fact that most of the VW forums basically can't find anyone who's actually ever used that product. So the products that I've heard of folks actually using in shops and from mechanics are either the Honda Bond, or in this case I went out and got Permatex. Specifically Permatex 85420, which is a gasket dressing and sealant, and it apparently remains tacky throughout its lifetime and over a pretty broad temperature range. Now, with that said, there were plenty of people on the forums that said no use to use any sealant at all. The O-ring does just fine. I'll just be on the conservative side and put a bead of the sealant on as well as use the O-ring.
So I will do that when I install the new one. Alright, so here's the top of the flange for the oil cooler and filter.
There is no phalange!
And we've got a temperature sensor and a pressure sensor. Those two I'm replacing. I'm going to leave this flange on. I suppose I could take it off and clean this up around the back where it hits the block, but maybe not. We'll see. Anyway, I want to get some penetrating oil on both of these and get these replaced.
Squirt. Squirt.
Idiot!
Are you kidding me? What the fuck? The goddamn sensor sheared off. 18 foot-pounds. That's what it says in the book. And it sheared right off. I mean, like, seriously? Seriously.
That's so whack.
Unbelievable.
So instead of dwelling on the failure, I put the old temperature sensor back in and proceeded to put the new 1.8 bar pressure sensor in.
Alright, so here's the old one. A little bit of corrosion on the outside. The O-ring doesn't look too bad. And here's a new one. There's a brand new one, nice and shiny. O-ring. And, oh, that's interesting. It's got these little tabs on it. I assume those tabs go into some of these raised positions and then keep it in place. That's kind of cool. It doesn't look like there's any preferred way, but they do hook on these tabs that are here. So we'll get this one on next. Well, starting to work on the car today. And what do I have here? What is that? Frickin' snake in my garage. Don't want to know where the rest of them are, but that's interesting. Huh. Alright, in prep of getting this new cooler on, I just want to take a a light scrub pad to the surface and get off any old sealant that was. Alright, I don't know if that's worth the mess or not. I assume when I put this thing on it's going to squirt all over the place, but it is what it is. Hopefully the O-ring is enough barrier. So the last thing to do is to get this thing put on the car. And let the squish begin. Alright, so getting that thing back on was sort of a pain in the rump. But there it is. This nut, there is not a whole lot for the socket to hold on to, and getting it torqued to 18 foot-pounds took a little bit of patience and making sure that it was seated flush against the oil filter mount, but it did click. So 18 foot-pounds, this thing isn't going anywhere, and there you go, one Mark II Scirocco oil cooler.